Morning, everyone. Welcome to another Operate First Data Science Community Meetup. Today we have Cali Dolfi from Red Hat's Open Source Programs Office, who's going to give you an overview about Project Sandiego, which can help you make good decisions and drive your community by using the open ecosystem data sets. So over to you, Cali.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Let me share my slides real quick. Just a second. I don't know why they're strange. Okay. Give me a quick second.
Sure, take your time.
There we go. I'm just going to keep it here because for some reason, anytime I try to share the screen, it goes into, I guess that'd be portrait mode. So you can see everything a little bit better. Yeah,
Okay, no
so
worries.
yeah, hi, I'm Cali Dolfi. I'm a data scientist on the Red Hat Open Source Program Office. I've been leading and working on this project for about a year now, as well as our intern James Kunstl, who has been working actively on this project but wasn't able to make his presentation today as he has class. So I can hop in and get started on the problem space of this project. So pretty much right in this project, we are focused on open source community analysis. And the idea of this is that when you're looking at open source projects, whether you're looking at it from inside as a community member, a community architect, or from somebody who's trying to decide whether to support this community, be involved in this community, or depend on the technologies that this community offers, you need to be able to make informed decisions about the health and sustainability of this community, or potentially where the areas that you need to better support this community to be able to get to your goal of depending on the software provided by this community. And a big focus here is trying to transition from metrics being a checkbox, something to kind of have because people expect you to have it, versus it transitioning to being a tool that actually drives decision making. A lot of times in this space, you can get a bar chart that tells you, okay, there was 20 commits in this month or 30 commits in this month, but what does that tell you as an actionable item of how to better serve your community? And that's a really, I think we can do a lot better than just looking at it from the small, like the different points of view of just looking at commits per month and trying to figure out how to make actionable decisions from the data we have access to. Trying to going into a little bit further of the community impact of looking at open source community analysis. With this is trying to look at how to achieve sustainability within your community. Risk factors can be seen at a much higher level and hopefully be able to flag issues before they become a problem that really plagues your community. We can start to look at how to measure internal project health and being able to actually quantify how your community is impacting the broader ecosystem and being able to communicate to businesses or other people in a language, which is data that people are really looking for to be able to put value behind your words. And you can really start to advocate for your community once you start getting more data and being able to show the trends and being able to show the overall impact of what is happening within the community. And then also as well, this can lead to early detections of risk factors, and that can help us inform business decisions if you're like from the perspective of somebody like Red Hat, or be able to, from a community architect, be able to navigate and change to be able to go for the fact that maybe there's a portion of your code base that is only being maintained by one or two people, and understanding the vulnerability behind that, looking at the amount of testing overall that is happening on certain portions of your code base and the vulnerabilities that can come. And so by taking it a step further with how we look at community data, we can actually start to change the decisions that we make in an informed fashion. Another perspective that we can look at this is from the business impact. And so this is from people who are looking at it from the outside of the community looking in. Like I said, we can look at this from the Red Hat perspective, but you can also look at it from pretty much anybody who is on the outside looking in. If we're looking at somebody who's trying to use a project for personal use, so there's somebody who's trying to decide which project they want to support or be a part of, we can start to use these metrics to be able to make more informed community decisions and figure out whether this is something you want to get involved in or not, or also which way that you would want to support this community if you did. When we started to look at community data analysis, we actually started by seeing what was the prior tooling out there that, especially from like the dashboarding perspective of looking at open source communities, where you kind of look at it as, okay, I want to look at this certain open source repository or organization and a report or something of that fashion being auto-populated with information. And we found some consistencies among the limitations of the other options in the field right now. And some of those included data observability and direct access. A vast majority of these open source dashboarding projects that are currently out there, with Cauldron being one of them, and you have Grimoire Lab, all of them are based off of the Perceval for data collection and the Elasticsearch stack. And with Perceval, there isn't a lot of data observability, and there can be inconsistencies in the data that we have found. And because of that, there is no way that I or someone else can go and change and figure out how to fix it. It's like, okay, if I see that there's a miscalculation in something like the number of commits, which is actually something we ran into, there was nothing we could do about that. In that situation, we found that that was going to be a direct limitation, and we wanted to make sure that we could confirm anybody using our tooling that our data is correct and it's representative of the state of that repo or the state of that community. Another thing that we ran into was visualization limitations. So we could look at data from like bar charts and means of one's maybe commits, or looking at pull requests, but it didn't allow for more back-end like aggregation of data, trying to transition over more into the data science edge of things and modeling versus just looking at metrics, kind of moving over on that scale. The tooling really didn't allow for it. And so that's when we started to look into other options and starting to figure out that if we wanted to achieve our personal goals around this, that we needed to come up with our own solution. And so that's pretty much where Project Sandiego was born out of. And so from here, we can go into what are the two project phases for Project Sandiego. The first one is we're calling Explorer, which is going to be a generated dashboard that is being able to, my bad, this is actually mixed around. I don't know how that happened. Just a second. Sorry about that. I'm just gonna move this really quick. Or doesn't get confusing. Sorry about that. I don't know how I missed that, but these are two different phases for our open source project. I'll start first at looking at Explorer, which is going to be a Python multi-page dashboard. And the goal is to be able to develop insightful metrics around the visualizations to actually inform people on the project. The idea here is to be able to break it up into multiple different pages, dependent on what the visualization or metric is looking at things like testing and the CI/CD, looking at dependencies, looking at more of the community perspective and maintainers. Those are the different sub areas that we're looking at going into for the Explorer. And the big focus here is that as we start to develop the Explorer, we want to have lots of community input in what we're showing in the dashboards and trying to make sure it's informative of what people actually care about. And I think that as we go along, that's whenever we're going to really start going into the portion where it's informative, not just looking at the metrics as we're used to seeing. The second phase of this project is around the open source ecosystem mapping. And so with the data that we are collecting to support the Explorer, we're also hoping to be able to map the open source ecosystem by connecting factors like common contributors, common dependency, the code base, and looking to see what are similar projects, how close or far are they together. If you're looking from an individual project, say that I'm a community architect for Conveyor, seeing what projects are relatively closer to me, what is in the same ecosystem, or potentially what are projects that may extend our reach. And so those are the two phases of this project that we're looking at. And so at this point, all of our project data is coming from the Augur project within Chaos. And so whenever I mentioned some of those limitations before were around data observability, this project was actually created out of the problems that they saw within Percival, because that's also a part of the overarching Chaos project. And so the Augur project, it takes in a Git-based repo or org, and it will load in the entire data into this relational database to be able to look at the project. And so if people are interested, we can look at the entire relational database and see pretty much what I have found here is that there is pretty much more data than I could ever possibly want to work for like use from the Augur project. So it's really great to feel like the options are almost limitless in the way that we can look at these open source repos. The thing is here is that this is a data collection tool only. And so we are pretty much using this as the basis of what we're doing with the open source, with our Explorer dashboard. So I'll go into what we're calling phase 0, which was like the unofficial phase that came to generate this entire project. And so we started very focused in on talking to people within Red Hat and communities on what analysis would be useful, how to structure this project in a way that would be effective for all parties that would be interested in this data, and really trying to define project scope. What I found going into the OSPO team is that there wasn't a lot of talk around what community analysis could look at and look like. And so with that, you found a lot of people having so many different ideas and a lot of really, really interesting ideas of how we could look at this. And so while we had so many different ways, we had to kind of go in and define a more specific scope to be able to try to get to that point and hopefully extend this project later on. As well as the next thing that came into with phase 1 was defining technical architecture. For those who are familiar with Red Hat OSPO, this is the first project of this type coming out of this team. And so there wasn't that technical workflow set in there. There wasn't this where it's like, okay, we develop here and this is how our reviews happen. This is the type of code base that we normally use. That baseline wasn't set up, so we had to do that within the Sandiego project itself. And one of the big decisions that we ended up making was deciding to do our dashboard development in Dash and Python. And it really has, we'll go into it a little bit more later on this presentation, but it allows us to really kind of get the best of both worlds with a lot of the different things that we're wanting to do with open source analysis. And the last phase of this project was doing the Augur data exploration with Jupyter notebooks. We wanted to start first learning how to access this data, how to analyze it, how to make visualizations, and kind of give ourselves a starting point to understand, kind of inform our decisions whenever creating the general plan for this project. And so for the current work that's happening right now, we have current work that's happening around our database, which is our personal Augur instance, or not personal, but the Augur instance that we have within OSPO. And so at this point, we have over 10,000 GitHub repos currently loaded in. And this database is currently stored in the OSPO community cage. And the community cage is actually a partitioned portion of Red Hat IT that is for open source communities that OSPO supports, and for this, and as well as for now for Project Sandiego. And then right now we're working on the final stages to be able to have API access to be able to load in orgs and repos directly and start to create an automatic process with that. the current work that's happening right now around the dashboard, which is Explorer. This is kind of our main focus right now. We're largely focused in establishing a workflow of how to go from our visualizations to dashboard integration. And so the way that we've decided to do this is to start by making our visualizations and the data collection in a Jupyter notebook using Plotly, and then being able to move that over into the Dash app. We found that pretty much you can do the same exact code that you would do for Plotly, and you can do Dash in a notebook and have it to be where that's your sole focus, where we have one notebook looking at one visualization, and then pretty much it's a copy and paste fashion to be able to integrate it into our Dash app. A few reasons why we decided to do this was one, accessibility when it comes to contributors. It's a lot easier for somebody who's familiar with Python to come in and tackle a visualization in a notebook than having to learn all of the ins and outs of Dash if that's not what you want to do. As well as when we have individual requests that come in from communities trying to look at something that's very specific to an individual community, it's much easier from somebody to go from a notebook and toggle something a little bit and have it to be something that's personal for that community or the way that they're wanting to look at that data. And so there's kind of accessibility from both ends. A lot of our work that's happening right now is doing the technical and just design wireframe. So setting up the dashboard to be able to put in those visualizations is almost like little puzzle pieces, and then making the design on like a wireframe design to be able to know, okay, these are the visualizations we're doing on which page, what does the analysis give, what context do we need to give, and then as well as starting to create the search bar for our dashboard. So allowing users to define what set of open source repositories or open source organizations that they want to see the dashboard have the data populated. And so, yeah, I'm going to go here. I have the links in this presentation where it has the dashboard design, our GitHub repo with all of the code that we've been working on, and a high-level overview of the timeline for the different phases of this project. So yeah, I just talked for a really long time, and thanks for sticking with me through a little hiccup on the phases. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cali, for this amazing presentation. If you all have any questions, this would be a great time to ask them. And thank you again, Cali, and everyone else for joining this meetup. If there are no questions, maybe we would give you your 40 minutes back and see you in the next meetup.